All right, you're good to go.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us at the Des Moines Power BI user group. It's been a little over a year since the last time we had an event, and so I'm really glad that everybody was able to make it. We're going to try to have these a lot more frequently now. I'm here with Dippo Thompson and Matthew Roche, and go ahead and say hi, guys. And I'm just going to pass it right on to Matthew here, so he can get started with the presentation. Thank you.
Awesome. So thank you very much, James and Dippo, for bringing me in. It is a real pleasure to be here, especially talking about one of my favorite topics. And I do want to highlight how, despite the fact that the last few years have been awful in 1,000 different ways, one of the real highlights for me is the ability to get in touch and stay in touch with more user groups and community activities around the country and around the world in a way that physically attending would not have been possible. So thanks very much for having me. And if I had realized that this was going to be the first meeting of a resurrected group, I don't know what I would have would have done differently. But I certainly would have appreciated it even more going in. It's great to be here. I'm very pleased to be involved. From an introductory perspective, I want to start off with a quick background on myself as the speaker and basically explain some of the reasons why the topic that we're discussing today is so important to me. So for years and years, starting in the 90s, I was a .NET developer, a SQL Server developer. I did training, mentoring, architecture, and eventually, leading up until the time that I joined Microsoft in 2008, I was specializing more and more in data warehousing, and ETL in particular. And I got to solve a lot of interesting customer challenges building data solutions, from requirements through delivery and beyond. When I joined Microsoft in 2008, I spent 3 years working for the learning group. I then worked on SQL Server integration services, data quality services, master data services, Power BI V1, and Azure Data Catalog V1 before joining the Power BI Customer Advisory Team, or CAT team, back in 2018. And I've been working on the CAT team for almost 4 years now. It's really weird to say that out loud, but basically, in my current role, I work with the biggest customers in the world. Basically, if you have tens of thousands of active Power BI users, if you have these massive analytics and BI infrastructures that you've developed on Power BI and the Microsoft Cloud Data Platform, my team and I are working with you both to help make you successful today and to help improve Power BI as a product moving forward. And in this role, I get to engage with the owners of Power BI, like the analytics directors, the chief data officers, the data architects, the people that are responsible for rolling out both the technical implementation and the usage of Power BI inside these global enterprises. And what I've found is that with business intelligence as it is today, most of the challenges for being successful are no longer related to technology. So even though you need technical experts, you need the right tools, you need the ability to do the heavy lifting to go from where the data is to where the data needs to be so the insights can be created and consumed. A lot of it is getting more complicated based on how business intelligence has gotten to where we are today. And before we jump into looking at data culture as a topic, it's worthwhile to review where we are and how we got here. And if we think about business intelligence solutions, this marketecture slide, this like really high level boxes and arrows, like Fisher Price toy level view of a BI architecture, where on the left hand side, we have the operational or OLTP systems, these transactional systems where data is being produced. It's getting transformed and prepared in some sort of ETL tool or ELT or other data preparation. We have a data warehouse and or a data lake and or a data lake house. There's lots of components that could go into that middle tier, but basically BI architectures tend to have a place where data is staged, where it is standardized, deduplicated, cleansed, prepared, certified, and whether it's a data warehouse, a data lake, or some combination of many, this is part of that end-to-end stack. And then many BI applications also have an analytics model, so a cube or tabular model where the engine is optimized for lots of concurrent users running ad hoc queries. So this is your Power BI data set or analysis services model. And then you've got reports and dashboards where people are interacting with the data, solving their business problems, and going about their business. And this is cutting edge in 95, 96 maybe. So this slide would have been familiar to people 25 years ago. The thing that's really new, and new, of course, being like the last 10 years, but the recent changes that make today's topic more relevant are the fact that more and more parts of this end-to-end architecture are now able to be developed by non-technical business users. So a tool like Power BI, and let me emphasize, I'm on the Power BI team. I love it. All of the industry analysts like Gartner and Forrester have Power BI as the dominant leader. Like there's not really any reason to not choose Power BI, but the same patterns would apply to any modern self-service BI tool where before self-service business intelligence, anything that you needed done, you needed to go to IT. I need a report. Let's get it in the queue for our report developers. I need a column added to the dimension in the data warehouse. Boy, we'll have that for you in 3 to 6 months based on our priorities. The self-service nature of these tools means that business users can solve their own problems without needing to wait on IT. And it solved this whole broad category of well-known difficult problems. They're just not really problems anymore. At the same time, it introduced a whole new universe of new well-known difficult to solve problems, because when you have people who are not super skilled in the technology, they're focused on solving today's problems, whereas someone who is more of a technologist, a data architect or data developer, they might be thinking about tomorrow's problems proactively. I like to think about how in my family, my wife is the carpenter. So she has a undergraduate degree in theater tech. She did like costume design and stage design. And if we need something built, she's the one that builds it because she's got the table saw, she's got all of the power tools that I would literally injure myself with. And I could go into her shop and I could put something together and probably it would do what I needed, but it wouldn't be the refined, functional, stable, long-term tool that she would build, because she knows more than just how to hit things with a hammer. I can hit things with a hammer. I'm the self-service carpenter. And those patterns, even though I'm not really sure the analogy is going to hold up to super close inspection, when we think about business intelligence today, and we think about the need for a healthy data culture today, a lot of it comes down to who's doing what with what data and what tools, and how are they enabled by the larger organization. So as we segue over into talking about a data culture, I want to first say this is what I mean when I talk about a culture in general. I'm very lazy for my slides, so I'm not going to read any of them, or I hope not to read any of them. And for many things, this is like a screenshot from a DuckDuckGo search result, right? So you type in define culture, this is what comes back, and I've screenshotted it. But a culture is the shared beliefs, behaviors, and customs of a group of people. And if you think about human culture, like if you go to Europe, there's trains everywhere, right? In the US, not so much. If you go to Philadelphia or Chicago or New York or Houston, there are different foods that you can get on every street corner that are better there and more common there than in other US cities. Each one of these things, whether it's food or music, driving on one side of the road or another, the things that we do every day because we are members of a group of people, this is what a culture is, at least for the purposes of our discussion today. And when we put that together with data, and we start to define what a data culture is. And this is, again, the definition screenshotted from Wikipedia. So it's like not any unique content right now, but a data culture is a business organizational culture where the use of data for decision making is encouraged and rewarded. So we make decisions based on what the data tells us, not on our gut feel or our personal experience. We have data driven decisions, and this is part of what we do every day. And at the end of the day, a healthy data culture looks like this. Again, I'm not going to drain the slide, but a healthy data culture is what you live in an organization where the right data and the right tools are made available with the right guidance in the right places at the right time so that the right people can work with that right data in the right tools to make data-driven decisions so that they can be more productive and efficient. One aspect of it is that this means that the data professionals, they can do the hard but often boring to business users things. Like they can handle the scale and the performance and the security and the governance and the infrastructure. And the business people, they can focus on applying their business expertise using the tools and the data that are made available to them to solve problems without needing to ask for help, without needing to wait for IT availability. And perhaps the most exciting thing, so, and I say exciting because I get to see this in practice in the real world, and it's beautiful when you see it in practice. The exciting thing is that both both sides, both aspects, like the two complementary sides of the coin, with the IT people doing the things that they're good at and the business people doing the things that they're good at, both sides are recognized and rewarded for doing their part of the job, for upholding their part of this cultural contract. And this, hopefully, this sounds familiar to you. Hopefully, each one of you can look at this and see, boy, this is really, this is part of my day to day life. And for those of you that are looking at this and saying, it's like, whoa, that doesn't exist anywhere. Uh, Rest assured it does, and we can help you get there. Today's talk is about saying these are the factors that contribute to a successful data culture. This is the North Star. This is the goal that we're striving towards. And the most important factor, which sadly is the least actionable factor for most people, it's the thing that you have the least leverage to directly influence, it's executive sponsorship. And I want to emphasize this, if you don't have an executive sponsor, all of the things that I'm talking about will fail. So I have my little mic drop animation in PowerPoint there. That's as good as we get for my PowerPoint skills. I built this slide myself. Um, so let me step back a little. It is possible to do a lot of these things without a true executive sponsor, but it's hard. It's really, really hard because typically the scope of a culture, the scope of a data culture is defined by the authority of the executive sponsor that is driving your work. And if you don't have an executive sponsor, all of the little tasks that you need to do, whether it's technical or interpersonal, they're just harder than they would otherwise need to be. Kind of like running a marathon in sand. Like running a marathon is hard, but if you're running a marathon in sand, it's like taking it to the next level of difficulty. It's like stupid hard rather than just hard because there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So if you don't know who the executive sponsor for your data work is, stop, step back, and think about who is it that sends, like, if you've developed a new report to support or enable or accelerate a business process, who is it that sends out the thank you email or the great job or that amplifies the numbers and the insights that you're sharing? That person or those people are your short list for the ones that, as part of the broader effort, you contact or engage with to see if they can be an executive sponsor. That type of bottom up recruiting is difficult And not every workplace culture supports this type of, going outside of the chains of authority. So don't do anything stupid. Ideally, there is a top-down identification of executive sponsorship where the CEO is like, oh, we need to be more competitive. Like there's a business driver that accelerates the steps in a digital transformation. So if the CEO is really bought in on the outcomes of having a data culture, they will probably be looking at a chief data officer or chief analytics officer, or promoting someone or giving someone the explicit responsibility and authority to do some of the things that we're talking about today. But if no one owns it, it's not important. If it's not getting funded, it's not important to your organization. So this is the red flag right at the beginning. If you don't have an executive sponsor, all of the other things are going to be really freaking hard. And if you're saying, oh, well, I don't know how to do that, I'm going to do the other things instead. So good luck, but be aware that it's going to be an uphill climb, like pushing a rock, like a Sisyphus pushing the rock up to the top of the hill and it rolls down the other side. And just be aware of what you're going into. So there's the pause at the beginning. I'm going to take a sip of water, and then we're going to talk about the easy part of building a data culture. And the easy part is technology. So the most significant technical realization or technical direction for building a data culture is understanding that there is no one size fits all, that every BI application or data source is a special snowflake, and that you need to give people the ability to work with the data and the tools that they need within the guardrails or constraints that are defined by the business. I don't believe that I use the term data governance on any of these slides, because data governance is like a big, big topic. It's related to building a data culture, but that's a rat hole that we're going to avoid today. But generally, data governance is having the guardrails in place to make it so that it's easy for people to do the right things, and it's easy for people to identify when they might be doing the wrong things so that they can't avoid them. And if you think about the types of applications that people are building with data, if you look up at the top of my triangle diagram, there are some things that need tight controls and oversight, and only a very limited people should be working on them or contributing to them. Like think, for example, for the US, this would be those applications where there are numbers being reported out to the SEC, like the annual financial report for a publicly traded company. If those aren't accurate, Sarbanes-Oxley says your executives could do prison time. Odds are your executives don't want to do prison time. So there's lots of controls around those compliance-sensitive data sources and outputs. At the other end of the stream, the other end of the extreme, each one of you every day is going into Excel or Power BI desktop or your BI tool of choice. You're pulling in data from different sources. You are mixing and matching and making things that maybe only you will look at. Maybe you'll share it with your small team. Maybe you'll just throw it out and never even save it because it was a quick exploration and done. And in order to be successful, to build a truly thriving data culture, everybody needs to recognize that there is no one size fits all, and there should be these clear and consistent responsibilities, or clearly defined criteria and clearly defined responsibilities, so that even though where the line goes doesn't matter, so it could be higher, could be lower for where the controls kick in, everybody needs to agree this is what the line means, and everybody needs to agree this is what falls above or below a given line. So you'll find the size that works best for you, and then everyone can align to it with rewards and recognition for following the rules, and the gentle but firm redirection for people that go outside those rules. One of the things that you may have heard various people at Microsoft talk about is the phrase discipline at the core and flexibility at the edge. So this is a slide that I've stolen from our executive briefing deck. So if you're like an executive at some large company and you're coming into Redmond to have people from Microsoft tell you about why you should continue to align your strategy with our technology, this is an expurgated version of one of the slides that's part of the Power BI EBC deck. But basically, it's a story about how Microsoft, particularly Microsoft Finance, used to have a cowboy culture where everybody did their own thing. It introduced these problems. And now we have this very well managed set of KPIs and hierarchies that are part of a Power BI and analysis services instance where everybody uses these curated, trusted golden numbers from this central source, but everybody's also empowered to do their own things outside of that. And even though I love this as a concept, though, discipline at the core and flexibility at the edge, somebody should put it on a t-shirt. But the more that I talk to customers, even at very large, or the more that I talk to people, even at very large customer organizations, the more I realize that Microsoft is a lousy example. It's like going to NASA to say, it's like, oh, I want to start an airline. It's like, well, NASA went to the moon, so let's be like NASA. It's like, it might be a good aspiration, but NASA probably does a lot of things that your commuter airline might not need to do right away. So instead, I wanted to bring in an example, and this is like the canonical generalized example from dozens of enterprise organizations that I've worked with, where I've literally had dozens of people describe to me, well, in our organization, we think about Power BI organizations as rings, where the outer ring is everybody who wants to do work in Power BI desktop can work with it, and then a limited number of people get pro licenses for sharing, and then there are criteria for deploying an application into a Power BI premium capacity. And then for the really important things, we've got an enterprise BI team. It's like the central team that lives in IT or is attached to a key business function like finance or supply chain. And they just build the traditional BI applications using Power BI and Synapse and other modern cloud data tools. And I've seen this again and again and again, but my favorite example of it is from a retail organization based in North America. I'm not going to name them, but in that conversation, this is how they labeled their rings. Again, going from everybody on the outside to the I love hardcore IT. That's their phrase at the inner ring. And I'm going to use this as an example to talk about the reality of the need for a self-service application to grow up or to be operationalized. And in this specific company, they have a data-centric culture where any of their employees, including the cashier, the stock boy, the assistant manager, they can all work with data. They have an enterprise E5 license, so everybody has the ability to connect to Power BI and to publish. But any user can work with the curated data sets that are made available for them based on their security permissions. There are some key departments like think floral or there are some like think floral or deli, or like where the nature of the thing that they're selling has a life cycle that means that they need to do different data things with it. I'm not speaking super clearly on this, but some departments need more intelligence. They get more data curated for them by the central team, and they get more help available along the way. Most departments have power users or champions, where even though they're still responsible for running the district or running a given department in a given store, maybe they're the store managers, where they have these power users that, because of their interest, they get more tools, more support, and so on from the central team. And then at the middle, there's again this traditional BI centric development team that builds the enterprise applications that the whole business runs on. But the question is, what happens when a self-service application from one of the outer rings grows? So what if I build it, but then there's a business process that grows around the solution that I developed, and it's not my job to support the whole thing? What do I do then? And there we go. Let's see if my little transition actually worked the way that I wanted it to. Oh, I see Mike nodding on my monitor. So it looks like that worked. That's again, the extent of my PowerPoint skills is apparently using the Morph Transition. But this, this organization, again, this is a specific example, but this is a pattern that I see many different large organizations implementing. And that is that they have well-defined entry points for business users who have developed self-service applications to engage with that central team or center of excellence. And this is often in the form of office hours or similar things where if I'm the finance guy or the person that runs the deli, I can come in and say, it's like, I'm really struggling with this DAX thing, or how do I connect to this data source? Because I keep getting this error. So they can come in for this type of tactical one and done type question, but they can also come in to say, I've developed this solution and I believe that it should be handed off to IT so that it can be more scalable, supportable, reliable than I can maintain on my own. And this organization has 4 different phases that a self-service application will go through, where there are well-defined criteria or requirements for each phase. The first one being exploration. During the exploration phase, they assign a BI buddy. I forget the exact term that they use, but someone from the central BI Center of Excellence team is assigned to work with the self-service BI author. They look at what they've built, they understand the business problem, and they basically prove out that there is a broader business value and impact that this solution could deliver if it were managed by the central team. And if the answer is yes, then they move on to promotion. In the promotion phase, they do some basic things like setting up a data source on an enterprise data management gateway so they can have a scheduled refresh. They apply like the standard fonts and colors and logos so that it looks like an official BI application. And then they evaluate again because they've already done the first step in growing up. The application, just because they have the gateway and the scheduled refresh, like they're already better off because there isn't a need for more for manual refresh. And this particular organization disables personal gateways. But the next step would be if it is an application that should be owned and maintained based by IT based on their well-defined criteria, they then take it through the preparation and operationalization phases, where during preparation, they move what is often Excel or SharePoint list-based data into Azure SQL DB or Synapse or some other source. Like they make it so that the data is supportable and reliable. They build documentation, they define who's going to be the business owner, the support owner, the technical owner, who's the data steward. You know, they have all of the roles that they need to fulfill. And when they're done with this, they will then hand it off to run it in a production workspace. They onboard it into their help desk so that it's supportable. They have an SLA and all of these other things. So this is basically a process that can start at a well-defined point, but it could, whoop, stop that. So it could stop at exploration. It could stop at promotion. I don't think that it can stop at preparation. I think that once they go there, they're kind of committed. But the whole point is that when a business user says, I've made a thing and it needs to live and grow and thrive on its own, they have the process to support this. And this makes it so easy to align with the goals that they've defined for their data culture, which is more people solving more problems with the right data in the right way. They've got this beautiful partnership, and that partnership where business people, because So very often, technical developers, when we say business people or business users, it's almost a derogatory term. So very often it's dismissive or belittling to call someone a business user. I want to emphasize these people are absolute experts in ways that technical people typically are not, because they know the business process, the problem, the inputs, the outputs, the nuances, the inefficiencies, the challenges. They know this in and out. They live it every day. What they don't know is like super advanced DAX. They might not know SQL optimization, right? So having those people that are intimately familiar with the problem domain of the business, and having processes like this that allow them to work efficiently and collaboratively with people that are intimately familiar with the solution domain of the technology, that's the sweet spot. That's where magic happens. And uh, I see some questions are coming in chat. My eyes are too old to read the font, so I can see them there. Does someone want to relay questions to me, or should I save those for the Q&A at the end? So I see them there. What should I do with them?
It's totally up to you. I'm just queuing them up. So you're more than welcome. If you feel comfortable just kind of getting through the rest of the slides, we will hold them until the end. I'm just teeing them up here and we can come back. And we will give context to where they kind of came from. I'm trying to add context in the chat just in case. So you have where they were asking the question, and it really good discussion. Honestly, the YouTube chat channel is like lighting up. People are having a lot of fun there. So you're doing a great job, and people are. Someone was commenting, where was this slide 10 days ago when I needed this to communicate to my leadership exactly what we need to do with our data culture? So there are people that are seeing this for the first time and absolutely loving it. So good job.
Excellent. And 10 days ago, it was already on ssbipolar.com, which is my personal blog. An older version of this deck is already out there. I will share this version of this deck with the organizers of tonight's user group. Perfect. So that they can share it however they choose to.
We will.
But we've got a resources slide at the end as well.
I sent a link to your previous post already. So there's already the old one that's on your the legacy one back in 2020. We have that one already linked out there. The blog post is out there. You can check the YouTube chat. It will be out there, and I've also put it on LinkedIn, so you can go get the link for the video or the slides, and we'll update the slides and put them else for you to get later. Thank you.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for the support, Mike. It's awesome to work with professionals. So and it's also nice to work with you, Mike. I don't mean to diminish you like that.
No, I'm just teasing because I am in no means a professional.
So we talked about the hard part, right? No, we talked about the easy part, which is the technology. Now let's talk about the hard part, which is, of course, the people. The data culture is all about the right people doing the right things at the right time with the right data, et cetera, et cetera. How do we make that happen? The two most important pieces are having a center of excellence and having that center of excellence serve as the nucleus of and the curator or nurturer of a broader community of practice. And for the center of excellence, this is typically where you have the key stakeholders from the relevant business and IT groups, and this will differ from organization to organization, but the IT people that are funded to deliver data and BI solutions, and the business people who are often like the business leaders, decision makers, that are often funding those IT groups to deliver what the business groups need. So those people, the people that own the systems, that own the processes, and very importantly, people with budgets to fund the work, because it has to be somebody's job. If it's not somebody's job, if no one is getting paid, if it's not getting funded, then nobody cares, right? Money is how corporations and most organizations express interest and importance. If it's not important enough for them to fund, your efforts to change things are, again, it's not just going uphill, you're climbing a cliff at that point. So that's another thing to watch out for. But the center of excellence, they provide resources, they provide information, they provide the training, the community hub, they have the experts with answers, and that broader community of practice is everybody that's using the tools or might use the tools or is thinking about using the tools to solve more problems with data. And the thing that a successful community has is both people with problems, so people who can come in and say, it's like, oh, I really need I need help figuring out, should I do this in a calculated column or should I do it in my Power Query, or can you put it in the data warehouse? Like that kind of question. There needs to be a community where people can come with this type of question, or where do I find this data? How do I do this thing? And people that answer the questions as well. And even though the center of excellence tends to be populated by and composed of those deep technical experts that own the things and know the things, a successful community also has members in it that, even though it's not their job, they're the ones that say, oh, I've had that problem before. This is how I solved it. A successful community has give and take, people asking questions, people giving answers, people requesting information, people providing that information. And if it's only the central team that is answering and giving, you need to do more work. You need to nurture and encourage more ongoing constructive contributions and collaboration. And very often this takes the form of champions. So a champion, in my mind, is someone who goes into the community and does things that are not their job, or at least not their job today, typically around sharing resources, answering questions, helping others in similar roles, like the one finance guy. And it's often the finance guy, but the one finance guy that is like answering all the DAX questions. And you're thinking, how does this guy know all of this? And he knows it because a year ago, he built this Power BI dashboard that is now being used to run his entire business function. And he figured it out as he went. He went to YouTube, he read the documentation, he experimented, he took a course. And when that was done, he knew how to do this thing. And now when other people want to do a similar thing, oh, he's got them covered, right? And in the ideal world, those champions will be recognized and they will be rewarded for this effort. So if you're any part of this story, so if you're in the center of excellence, if you're part of a community, you're seeing this type of behavior, the thing that I love to do is I love to email that person and copy their boss to say, I just wanted to say thank you for this thing that you were doing. The efforts that you're making are really driving, like, whatever the business impact is, whatever that will resonate with that particular audience. But you say thank you in public in such a way that they understand not only that you're happy that they're going, outside of their job requirements, but that you're happy enough to highlight it so that it's going up the reporting chain. And this type of behavior, a simple thank you, is a real key aspect of building and nurturing that community. And at this point, I often feel like it's like, oh my God, how am I going to do all these things, right? So this is definitely an above my pay grade discussion for most people, because odds are, if you're on LinkedIn or on YouTube or whatever streaming channel you're joining through today, odds are you're not running a team of 100 people, right? You're here because you are a member of the community that's passionate about the technology and about data and about solving problems. And these are things, these are changes that are really hard to initiate. They are levers that are hard to move when you're at the bottom of the food chain or bottom of the reporting chain, if you don't have a position of leadership. And this is why having that executive sponsor is so important. And echoing back to something that I think that I said earlier, it was long enough ago that I can't remember what I actually said, but if you're thinking about that executive sponsor, the the leader, like the VP, the director, the C-level executive that consumes and provides feedback on your reports and data, that's the person that might be saying thank you to your boss or your boss's boss when you're stepping up to do that champion or to be that champion. So if we've got our community, we've got our center of excellence, let's talk about where that community is going to live, and that is going to be in a portal. And the portal is where the center of excellence will maintain and make available everything that the community needs. So it may not be possible to do everything, but this is where they should find the pointers to reports and data and training, guidance, help, ticketing systems, licensing, all of the frequently asked questions. The answers should be here, and it should also have some sort of collaboration space. So for most Microsoft organizations, like these days, we live in Teams, so you should have a Teams channel for this. You could use Yammer, you could use Slack, you could use Discord. I've seen a couple organizations that use Jira, which blows my mind. I can't see it working, but it works for them. The technology matters much less than what's there and the usage. So one of the things that I get in my current role is I get people emailing me with Power BI questions like, hey, Matthew, I saw your video on this, answer my question. And you know what I say? I say, no, I will not answer your question in email. No, pause, take a sip of my drink. But we have this internal community site here at Microsoft with over 3,000 active members where you and your peers can come and ask exactly this type of question. My whole team answers questions there. And if you really need an answer from me personally, tag me and I will prioritize responding. But I cannot scale to give answers to people via email. And the thing that we see, and this is going to sort of foreshadow the motivation conversation, human beings are inherently lazy. So like we don't want to do a lot of work, right? We want to choose the path of least resistance. And that means, oh, here's somebody, I'm going to send him an email because I know how to email him, right? And if I answer that first question, I guarantee the next 100 are going to come from this person and everybody that they talk to because they're choosing the path of least resistance. And I refuse to be the path of least resistance. I am the path of greatest resistance. But the value of this is that I can direct all of these people with questions to the place where all of the answers are. And not only does it provide value for me, because I don't need to answer these damn questions, it provides value for them because they're not blocked by my calendar and my inbox, which are awful. And it provides value to the community because the next time somebody has that same question, the answer is already there waiting for them. So it's this virtuous cycle, the center of gravity that value accretes around this portal, but only if people use it and only if someone owns it to keep it current and relevant and alive. And the other aspect or the other side of this equation is the fact that human beings, human adults are difficult, right? So we're complicated. We've got all of these often ill-defined motivations. And psychology today, so I kid you not, I'm like stealing from non-technical resources, and I see that 15-minute time check as well. So we're definitely going to come in with time for Q&A and a happy hour. But what am I trying to say here? So we're at 15 minutes. We'll dismiss that so that I can not be distracted. So here's the squirrel brain. If I answer questions in email, they distract me as well, and then I never get anything done. Motivation. Psychology Today published an article a couple years ago that identified 3 primary factors and 2 contributing factors that define what motivates human adults. And I can't say if it's true or not, but it rings true to me. The 3 primary factors are skill variety. So I don't do the same darn thing all the time. So different days or different times of the day I'm doing different things. This helps keep me motivated instead of just doing one repetitive thing all day, every day. One is task identity. This is where you can see how the work that you're doing, even if it might not feel like super important to you, you can understand where it fits into the broader process. So even if you might be a small cog in a larger machine, task identity is about being motivated by understanding how the whole damn machine will break if your part of it isn't executing, if you're not well oiled, as it were. And the third primary motivator is task significance, which is basically the work that I'm doing is making someone's life better. This is like the motivation that would inspire someone to work for Greenpeace or Habitat for Humanity, working at a nonprofit where they might make less money, but they know that the work that they're putting in every day, like this is life or death for someone, or putting a roof over someone's house, a roof over someone's head and their house. And the two contributing factors are autonomy, where people, even if they don't get to choose what they do, maybe they can have more choice over how they do it or when they do it. And the other one is feedback. So this is again saying thank you and meaning it, but it could also be providing critical feedback early on to guide, to learn. Like, critical feedback is always hard to give and receive, but when you know that someone cares enough about what you're doing to say, this isn't the right way to do it, let me help you do it the right way, that's really, really motivating. And in your community, you need to look for opportunities to use these levers, because like this is the inner working of the black box of the hard part of your data culture. So pay attention, even if you can't directly influence them. Understand that the activities that you take in structuring and executing on these community activities, they define how the culture is going to work or not work, how it's going to grow or wither away. I'm going to wrap up with 3 quotes, none of which are about data cultures, but to me are really, really, really about data cultures. The first one is my favorite quote from John Gall, who is an expert on complexities science, which is apparently a thing. It's like the science of complex systems. And for the quote slides, I am going to read them verbatim. So John Gall said, a complex system that works is invariably found to have evolved from a simple system that works. The inverse proposition also appears to be true. A complex system designed from scratch never works and cannot be made to work. And this to me is like really, really profound. And all of the people that are like defining this grandiose architecture, it's like, oh, let's do all of these things and then we'll be done. It's like, no, 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 no. Start small. There's nothing more complex than a culture, and a data culture is certainly an instance of this. Find a thing that works, scale it. Find another thing that works, scale it. Do it individually, do it in parallel, do them sequentially. Eventually they will come together. Get going in the right direction and then keep going and keep asking yourself, am I going in the right direction? Which leads me to my second quote, which is from Sun Tzu, which is one of my favorite Sun Tzu quotes. So Sun Tzu was this legendary Chinese general thousands of years ago. He wrote The Art of War. And this is one of those pithy quotes that people in the 21st century like to reuse in business contexts, people like me. So Sun Tzu said that strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory, and tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So strategy is, what does success look like? What are the broad goals that I'm working to achieve, and how will I know when I've achieved them? And tactics, what are the steps that I take to achieve a goal? And so many people, especially people who are early in their careers, so many people think that activity equates with progress, and this is nonsense. So if you're driving to the store and you don't know where the store is, if you get in the car and just start driving, are you going to get there? It's like, who knows, right? So the idea of having a strategy without tactics, if you know where you need to go, but you don't know how to get there yet, you are in the best position, because all that you need to do is to figure out how to get there, right? It might not be easy, but it's addressable. And if you're acting, but the team that you're part of, or you from day to day, you're not aligning your actions against a well-defined shared goal, this is the worst place to be in, because not only are you not making progress, odds are you're making things worse. And then the final quote, this is where we're gonna like share some resources after this and break for questions. But the final quote is actually the opening line from Anna Karenina from Leo Tolstoy. So this classic Russian novel starts out by saying, all happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. And the reason why this is a data culture quote for me is all of these successful, thriving data cultures that I have worked with, dozens of them around the world, many sizes, many industries, lots of variation, they all follow the patterns that I described today. So every single one of them has some variation, like the details are different, but with a broad brush, they're all doing the things that we've talked about in this session. But every organization that is like, oh my God, I don't know what to do, they are all effed, and they're all effed in a unique way to them, because they're the unhappy family that's unhappy in its own way. And very often, when we're thinking about getting from where we are to where we need to be, from today's chaotic, bad place to this healthy data culture, we could think about it as like getting across the river. So I need to get from this side to that side. It's like, oh, well, just get in the boat and row across, right? So it can't be that hard, but keep in mind that not only is each organization its own different river, like one of these is going to be easier to get across than the other, your organization will change over time. So when there are reorgs, when there are acquisitions, when there are layoffs, when there are economic upturns or downturns, each of these things will make what could have been easier 6 months ago impossible to do right now. So you need to hunker down and wait for the next opportunity. Or it could be like, again, I mentioned at the beginning how much I loved the ability to connect virtually, where the pandemic has made this more accessible and more of the norm. The other thing that I've seen as a positive for my life, at least with the pandemic, is that more and more organizations realized that they needed to prioritize this data culture thing. It's like, whoa, all of the efficiencies that we said were a nice to have in 2017 or 2018 or 2019, now it's seeming like it might be an existential threat, because the world is completely different now. And all of our shareholders are like, how are you going to make sure that you're surviving and thriving in 2020 and 2021 and beyond? So be aware that your starting point, your destination, and the path that will get you to success, it's different from any other organization in the world. So you need to define the strategic goals that you're working towards, because that will allow you to identify both priorities and the path to achieve them. And the one thing that I want to highlight on the resources slide, that Power BI adoption roadmap is a roughly 150-page set of documentation that MVP Melissa Coates wrote, working with me and MVP Peter Myers. So this was a project that we worked on over the summer. It is the consolidation of our best practices to not just achieve a data culture, but to do a lot of the detailed stuff that's in there. And one aspect of the adoption framework that I really, really love is, of the 10 main topics, each one of them has a set of well-defined organizational maturity levels, so that you can use relatively well-defined criteria to see where are you on the journey for this dimension of growing a data culture and driving your Power BI adoption, and then identify, using that as one of your inputs, what steps do you take, and what do you prioritize? So that is all of the content that I have prepared. I want to say thank you to everyone who listened to me for an hour. I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but I would love to take your questions. So Mike or James, fire away.
All right, I'm going to transition here to a 3-screen, and Depot, feel free to jump on a camera if you are. Yep, there. If you're around, everyone's good to go. Sorry, this is Mike behind the scenes. You don't see me talking because I'm actually on a different camera. So this is just going to be for these guys. You're good to go. James, go ahead and tee up some questions.
Where is that voice coming from?
I know, right? Hello.
All right, so Dippo, it looks like your mic is muted. So, but let's see here. So we have a question from Chewy here, and the question is: I know that my question is odd, parentheses, or dumb, and there is no dumb question, by the way, Chewy. Every company's culture is different, but what could be part of the lingo or jargon to use to get the executives' attention on this subject?
So what do executives care about? So, and this is probably the best question that we'll get all week, not just in this session, but in general. You have to know your audience, and to know your audience, you have to understand what it is that motivates them and what their goals are. And it reminds me of another Sun Tzu quote where he says, "If you know your enemy and know yourself, you will succeed in every battle." And then he goes on for the other variations with those two binary variables or binary. Anyway, so for talking with executives, the lingo, first of all, talk about digital transformation. This is a very executive-friendly term, and it is this broad blanket umbrella that means we are applying data, cloud, and other digital technologies to business processes in a way to optimize and make them more efficient, or to improve the output. So if you have the opportunity for that broad executive conversation, frame it as a digital transformation, because most of the time, when you get the top-down sponsorship and you get the people saying, "Oh, we really need to do this thing," they're thinking of it in those terms already. So introducing that into your day-to-day vocabulary can be very successful. If you're not having the senior executive conversations, very often it's focused on something measurable with dollar signs around it. So process optimization, increasing efficiencies, reducing costs. Find a pain point and phrase conversations around how these behaviors and these technologies will address that pain point to reduce costs, to increase revenue, to increase profits, to whatever the levers that your audience cares about. That's really the key. And the time that you spend familiarizing yourself with the needs of the organization, or finding an ally that knows those, and you can like tag team where you're the tech guy and they're the business guy, that's very often how those conversations are successful. But again, it's about understanding the audience and what motivates them. Because if you're saying, like, give me money for this thing, you need to be able to convince them that it's the right way for them to make that investment, and you can't do that without understanding their motivations.
Awesome.
Okay. We had a question from Jeff Weir here. It says, anyone doing office hours in some kind of public internal group? It says, my interns loved sitting in an office hour session and learning how to tackle a complex problem. Multiple words, one stone. I actually have an answer for you on this one, Jeff, and that is, if you ever watch the Saturday morning live streams from Guy in a Cube, there's a whole bunch of us that meet shortly before those live streams. We're called the Saturday Morning Learning Crew. That's hashtag SML. Look us up on Twitter, or you can reach out to me directly, and I'll get you in touch with the right people to get people, your interns or whoever in your organization, involved in that. So Matthew, do you have any other groups you'd recommend for that sort of thing?
So I know that Jeff is on a very inconvenient time zone, so it's like early morning for him in New Zealand. So I think that joining a US Saturday morning time is like middle of some night. So that may not work for him. I would say look for or be a seminal founding member of the SML like group in your area. The only similar community activity that I actively participate in is that Guy in a Cube live stream. And part of this is, I'm very selfish. I'm very isolated in my little sword-filled home office. It's a chance for me to be connected. So that's what draws me to it. I have not sought out any similar community for my own purposes, so I don't have any other ones to suggest.
There's also a public Slack work group called SQL Community. So that's sqlcommunity.slack.com. And that would be, that's basically people from all over the world. And there's channels in there that are specifically for Power BI, but there's also PowerShell help. There's SSRS, there's Azure Data Studio, DBA tools, like anything you want to know that has to do with the Microsoft data stack. That community has people online basically almost any time of day because there's members from all over the world. So, and if you, again, you can hit me up directly and I can get you an invite to that as well.
Cool.
All right. Let's see. Our next question here was what to do when the business users, oh, sorry, I lost my place there. What to do when the business users are the Power BI experts, not the central IT org, and can that be pushed from the bottom up?
So it can, but it's like the slowest path to victory. It's like the strategy without the tactics, right? So I'm going to go in a different direction, and I hope I will find a way to bring it back to the original question. I don't see the path yet, but it might be there when I walk down it. A pattern that is really, really common for Power BI is that it is adopted organically or virally by business units inside organizations where their IT managed BI infrastructure and tooling isn't doing what the business needs. So they've got the SAP tools that are really locked down, or they've got Cognos that's really locked down, or they've got something again that's really locked down. And the business people are like, I need to get my job done. In an older version of this deck, I had a meme of Jeff Goldblum from the original Jurassic Park movie, where he's saying, "Oh, the business always finds a way." Like in the original movie, it's like, "Oh, but they're all male, they're all female." I don't remember what gender the dinosaurs were, but they figured out a way to reproduce because life always finds a way, right? Well, if you lock down all of the official tools, somebody's going to find another tool, and these days, odds are it's Power BI because everybody can download it for free. Everybody can get their pro licenses or pro license trials. And by the time that central IT group figures it out, it's too late to quash, right? Because the financiers like these critical business processes that are running on this shadow BI or shadow IT tool, and very often it's not just the one finance group, it's finance here and it's supply chain in this one particular country, and it's like these three people in HR, but they're the important people that everybody's payroll is coming from. When you're in a situation like this, where the pockets of expertise have evolved organically inside a business unit, so I have figured out the way to circle it back around. The path to success is to get the leader of that business unit. Don't try to do all this yourself, but find the finance director or the supply chain owner, whoever the business unit owner is, where that business unit is where the expertise for Power BI has developed. They need to go to their peers, either peers in IT or up to whatever the shared point of authority is, like the the least common denominator in the org chart between that business group and the data group that isn't ready to support them, to identify the need, to acknowledge that this new tool, even though it wasn't selected by IT, it is an official tool that business critical processes are running on, and there needs to be that push over or push down to say, you and IT need to skill up, you need to develop a support strategy for this. It's kind of like how when everybody started bringing in their iPhones, remember when bring your own device was like a weird emerging thing and IT needed to figure it out? This is bring your own BI tools, and the patterns are very similar. But getting back similar to what my response to Chewy was, there needs to be a business case for it. And very often this comes down to the leader of the business unit where Power BI has gotten its roots in, to have that conversation, which may involve finance funding the Power BI heads, the Power BI headcount or staffing inside of IT. You know, it might come out of the finance budget for the first year or two, and those people are dedicated just to supporting the finance workloads while they build things up and figure out how to scale and integrate in. It's often messy, but it is something that happens every day.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. So we have a question here related to the sort of paradox of internal versus external support. And I'm hoping I'm understanding the way this question is phrased here. So if the person who asked it, if I get it wrong, please please say something. But it says, obviously, Microsoft has some scale with regards to getting a support network going in a Teams channel. And this person wants to reach out to teach their Power BI learners in their organization to use external help forums too, but then worried that it will starve the internal team's
channel.
Yeah.
Yep.
What would you say to that?
It's complicated, right? So I think a lot of it depends on what is the culture that you want to build. And so this is one of the weirdest things for me, is that I work with Adam Saxton and Patrick LeBlanc. Like, guys in cubes are on my team, and it's like just saying it out loud while the camera is on is like this huge imposter syndrome surge for me, because I have heard hundreds and hundreds of these massive global companies say, yeah, well, we mainly use guy in a cube videos for training our users. So they've taken this public resource and they've created playlists on their internal learning management system or SharePoint site or something similar that aggregates a public resource and is supplemented by the internally developed and maintaining training content. Like, how do I get a new data source on a gateway? How do I request a license? How do I open a ticket? It's like, guy in a cube is never going to have that. It's never going to be in the docs. That needs to be your organizational content. But they found a balance where there's internal and external. And each organization, like each team, will need to find their own balance there. And for a very large company like these global enterprises that I keep mentioning, like, this is where I work. Most of the companies that I work with, this is my comfort zone, and they will almost always have those internal community and internal informal support and internal well-defined support channels before they rely on external support. And they tend to discourage external community. You know, they're not going to say don't go there, but they're never going to send you there. For smaller organizations, it may not be feasible for you to have a full community with all of the experts and all of the champions so that people can go and get trustworthy answers to all of their questions. So in a situation like that, you may need to step back and say, either this is what, you know, again, well-defined criteria that we used in other contexts earlier during the session, but this is what the internal community is for. Always come here for this types of questions. This is what these external resources are for. If the internal community isn't giving you what you need, this is where you should go. So you might make that decision based on the criteria behind the question. Where it could be, on the other extreme, you could say, it does not make sense for us to have our own Q&A style community. Instead, we will say that for Power BI, we direct all of our internal users to community.powerbi.com or whatever the external site is. We ask everybody to go there, and our experts, they are expected to go there to answer questions and to be active contributors, because this is like, we're helping us and we're helping others, and I honestly, I don't know if that's going to scale, but the more that I think about it, the more that I like it, because it produces immediate benefits and longer term carry-on benefits in a way that an internal community would not.
Absolutely. Okay, got just a couple more questions here. The next one here says, I feel daunted. Some sources are direct query only. Some allow import. Even just there, I have two very different approaches to teach. Never mind teaching data viz, user experience. How to stop yourself from even starting?
So I am down. I was reading that in the chat alongside you. I'm not sure exactly where to go with this because it's getting a little bit out of my comfort zone. I would say I've never seen a data source that only supports direct query. It's all, you should be able to import anything. If that's not the case, then please ignore me. But there's different pros and cons to the different ways of working with data in Power BI. I'm going to tie this back to the data culture thing. A lot of Power BI capabilities are optimized about data imported into the tabular model. So the architecture of Power BI works best when you have data that is imported, that it's in a star schema, that you've got your measures that are defining the business logic, and then all of the other visualization and interaction and AI type capabilities, it flows from that initial model-centric view that Power BI is designed around. Typically, if you are looking at direct query, performance for direct query is poor. There are some features in Power BI that only work with import and don't work with direct query, or don't fully work with direct query. So leaning towards import is key. If you have users that are saying, well, it just takes too long to import, or my model's too big, blah, 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 9 times out of 10, it's a data modeling problem. So if you're trying to import everything into one giant table and you're cramming all of your columns and all of your rows into there, it's not that import is failing, it's that your data model is failing. And it's, there's, publicly available training on star schemas and data modeling and so on and so forth. But if we tie this back to the concept of, and I think this may be the context in which it was asked, if we tie it back to the data culture and the community of practice and all of these other things, you're never going to have experts that know everything. And this is where being able to work with, so I'm going to call on Dippo. I don't know if he's visible right now, but Dippo is one of the organizers working with James to bring me in as a speaker. He's part of the Microsoft account team. So most organizations have someone like Dippo that work with them, that can provide training resources, that can provide connections, answer technical questions, and so on. And there is a huge amount of community provided resources that are out there. If you are the person responsible for training and talent development in the COE, where you need to build a more highly skilled community of practice, it's your responsibility to understand what resources are out there. And even though no one is ever going to know everything, you need to know, or at least be able to learn, where do I go to find answers to this sorts of question? And ideally, you'll be in a position where it is okay for you to say, I don't know. yes, I'm the expert in this area, but I've never seen this before. It's going to take me a while to research it, to do a proof of concept, to find an expertier expert to ask. And not everybody is in a healthy culture where that is okay or where that is safe. But ideally, the questions that come in like this, you will be able to guide your users to best practices because you know more than they do. And where you and your users are pushing the boundaries of your knowledge and your experience, ideally you'll be in a situation where your growth can be fueled by the needs of the organization. And even though nobody asked for this, I want to tell a brief personal story. So before I joined Microsoft in 2008, I was a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional, or MVP, focusing on SQL Server integration services. And I got started in SQL Server integration services because I needed to use it on a project and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I went to the MSDN forums, like with the public community Q&A site at that point, and I asked a couple questions and I got helpful answers, and I kept going back there, and after a couple weeks I realized these people are asking questions that I know the answers to. And of course, I didn't know the answers a month ago, but I knew them now. So I would go there and I would answer questions and I would get thanked for it, like getting back to the motivation, right? It's like, wow, this is really awesome. And after a few months of this, I started structuring my day. I lived on the East Coast in the US at this point, where the first thing that I would do in the morning was I would go in and sit down and answer all the easy questions, like the questions that came in from Europe overnight. I'd answer the easy ones, and then by the time that the real experts came online, I'd gotten the low-hanging fruit. They could answer the hard ones. I was paying attention. Like I'd keep this open in a tab all day while I was doing my dev work, because I was like very code heavy in those days. And eventually, I realized, oh, I've seen this question before. I should start a blog where I can share the patterns of solutions to these commonly asked questions. So when a question comes in, I can give a brief answer and link out to the blog and everybody's happy. And it was this amazing virtuous cycle of learning for me, of actually giving back and making other people's lives better. And eventually, like people from the product team are like, wow, like, thanks, Matthew. It's really great to see you contributing here. It's like, oh, the people from the product team said thank you. It's like this huge deal. And then I became an MVP, and then they hired me, and the rest is history. And even though this is a little bit orthogonal, the general pattern of treating learning as a natural part of both personal and organizational growth, recognizing it and building practices around it, the types of challenges that you encounter day to day, they are opportunities for you, both personally and as a group, to become better over time. But they need to be recognized as opportunities in order for them to become that. That seemed more profound than I expected.
Well, this is Mike, and hello from the top of the side of the screen here. I'm going to jump in here. Matthew, this is an amazing point that you make here, and I just want to jump on that topic very briefly, because that's exactly how I started Power BI Tips, the blog. That's where I started from. I'm helping my organization figure out Power BI. I didn't know diddly squat. So I was trying to figure out, how do we get people to learn things? And I took the approach at the time I was working in a call center, and I knew that answering one email at a time is inefficient. And I adopted your path of maximum resistance, which I absolutely love that phrase. I think we joked about it last time we talked, being, we want to be the path of maximum resistance and push people to areas where they can go find their own solutions or answer it in a forum. And you'll see all my original blogs on Power BI Tips was just around, how do I connect to Excel? Multiple files in Excel, tabs in Excel, very simple things. But the reason that was coming to me is people were asking these questions and I didn't have the answer. And I had to go back and research it and figure it out. And it's not fair for us to assume that everyone knows all the answers all the time. It just won't happen. It's just not a fair assumption. So the idea here is, if I go back and look at my data models I made 2 years ago, I would horrendously be like, what in the world was I doing? But that's just part of the learning curve, and you get better as you go along. And so another phrase that I'll use is nothing is new under the sun, right? Someone has probably already done what you need to do. So go find that person and go ask them the question. So yeah, wonderful point. Super great talking point there. I think we have one more question, but in an effort to kind of give us a little bit of happy hour time, we're going to just share some links. So just transitioning the meeting a little bit here. We're going to stop the YouTube live stream. We're going to cut that off. We're going to share with you both on YouTube, and I think James is already sharing it, on YouTube and in LinkedIn. There will be a link here you can join. There's going to be a Teams meeting that appears. You can follow that link. That will open up a Teams meeting, and then Matthew, myself, James, and Deepo will all just jump on there for a little bit. We'll chat a bit more. You can turn on your cameras. Praise Matthew for his amazing event here that he put on. Again, I have people. I was talking to a client today. They have people who have reserved a room in their organization to sit down and listen and make sure they had dedicated space and time for this session, because they're so excited about, because we love this. And for those of you who follow me on the YouTubes or the podcast, I do this symbol in the camera. It's a podcast, and I'm symbolizing this is the pyramid that Matthew has presented in the slide deck. And I'm like, Matthew's pyramid, and I'm like showing the camera my passion for this pyramid schema, or not schema, but pyramid diagram of BI and architecture and ungoverned and governed. And I think this is incredible. I don't know what, Matthew, 20 plus years of knowledge you've rolled up here is absolutely phenomenal.
Well, I'm glad that you saved this for the end, because now I'm blushing and I will need to take a break before I'm able to speak again. But
sounds good.
But I see the short URL in the chat.
Yes, you should.
So I will see you. We'll see you all in Teams before too long. And
yes,
happy to keep the conversation going. At some point, it will be time to decorate the Christmas tree.
True.
But that point is not yet. So
okay.
see you in Teams.
All right.
Thank you all very much. We'll see you next month, maybe. James and I and Deepo will plan out what's the next speaker. We're gonna have a hard, tough act to follow. I think the only way we can, even compete here, because we got to go get, guy in a cube next. So maybe we'll have to have Matthew put in a good word here. Maybe we can get Adam or Patrick over here.
They're overrated.
Love it.
Wait, we're not still streaming, are we?
All right, and with that, thank you all very much. We'll see you in the happy hour. Cheers.
Thanks, everybody.